The woman came down out of the Sierra Madre in the last thaw of spring, her skirt torn and boots caked with bloodied clay. Her name was Ada, and she carried nothing but a shovel and a linen-wrapped bundle small enough to cradle in the crook of her arm. The pines whispered overhead as she walked, thin-bodied from grief and long travel, yet upright still, the way some trees will stand long after fire has eaten their hearts. She did not speak as she reached the clearing, just paused at the edge of it, squinting beneath the brim of her hat at the sun-drunk ruin ahead. A two-room cabin, half swallowed by creeping brush and storm-fallen limbs, leaned westward like it had been waiting too long. Its bones had once been straight and sure. There was the slivered remains of a porch rail, blackened wood that hinted at gunpowder days and nights where silence cost something. The chimney had cracked in two. One shutter still clung by a hinge, swaying gently in the wind like a widow rocking herself to sleep. She moved with care among the nettles and nettle-furred stones, found a patch of pine shadow where the needles softened the earth, and began to dig. She didn't weep. Her face had dried long ago into something harder than sorrow. The baby she buried beneath the trees had never drawn breath beneath the open sky. Born too soon, born in winter, in a snowbound cabin that had caved in on her hope. The earth gave back a scent of sap and old rain as she worked. Her fingers blistered, but she didn't stop. When the hole was done, she laid the bundle down, straightened the white linen, and whispered something too quiet for even the wind to catch. Then she covered the grave with both hands, like a mother tucking in a child. For a long while after, she stayed kneeling, palms to the ground. The light shifted. A jay shrieked once in the canopy above. Eventually, she rose and turned toward the cabin, not looking back. The door groaned as she pushed it open. The inside stank of mildew and mice, but there was strength in the beams yet. Dust coated everything, empty shelves, a broken-legged table, the remnants of a cast iron stove rusted through at the belly. She tested the floor with her boot. It held. There were signs of a life hastily abandoned. A whiskey bottle still half full, a cracked harmonica, bullets spilled across the hearth. The corner bed frame bore rope scars and bullet gouges. Above it hung a faded photograph nailed to the wall, 3 men in dusters, one of them grinning with a rifle laid across his knees. Ada's eyes lingered on it only a moment. She moved through the house slow, like she was stepping through someone else's memory. She didn't care about who had come before, only that the roof could be patched and the walls kept the cold out. That there were stones enough to build a chimney again. She'd lived in worse. She set to work that afternoon, sleeves rolled, hands raw, hauled out the old furniture, cleared the hearth, chased the mice into the scrub. She worked until her back ached and her breath came ragged. Then she sat on the stoop, dirt-smudged and alone, watching the sun dip below the edge of the ridge. Somewhere beyond the trees, a wolf howled. Night fell full and fast. No fire yet, no light but stars. She lay inside with her arms crossed on her chest, listening to the old house breathe around her. Every groan of timber, every rustle in the dark, she named and filed in her mind. This was hers now. This hollowed-out place, the ruin of some outlaw's past, taken by a woman who had nothing left to fear. She slept little. At first light she woke with purpose. There was wood to chop, a stove to mend, and seeds to plant, a grave to tend. And a life, maybe, to shape from ash. By the time summer deepened, the cabin stood upright again. Ada patched the roof with bark she'd stripped and soaked, then hammered it down with bent nails she straightened over the hearthstone. Smoke rose now from the chimney, thin and steady like a vow. Inside, she'd laid new floorboards where rot had eaten through. They creaked in the quiet, but she welcomed the sound. It meant the place was alive. She did not mark time with calendars or seasons, only with what her hands had made. The ash pile from her fire grew higher. The garden pushed up sprouts, beans and onions mostly, the kind that would hold through winter. She taught herself the rhythm of the land by feel. When the morning dew clung heavy, when the soil drank fast, when the birds quieted before a storm. The grave beneath the pines she tended each day, brushing needles aside, whispering little things. Some mornings she read aloud from a water-stained Bible she'd found tucked into the cabin rafters. Most times she just sat. She spoke rarely and only to herself. The woods offered no company but did not require any either. That suited her fine. Still, the past does not always stay buried, no matter how deep you lay it down. It began with boot prints, Not hers, these were heavier, wider in the toe, and fresh as the dawn. She found them by the creek's bend where she fetched water, just after a week of dry weather when no new marks should have showed. They ran along the bank, too deliberate for a wanderer, too cautious for a drunk. She stood still a long time, letting her breath slow. The prints ran north into the ridge, away, not toward. She told herself it was nothing, a trapper maybe, or some wanderer tracing the line of the river. But the wariness returned to her bones, that old tightness in the chest. She moved with more care after that, slept with the shovel closer. Weeks passed. The stranger did not return, or if they did, they left no sign. But the wind had changed in the valley, brought with it the scent of smoke from a fire not her own. She followed it one morning, tracking uphill through the black spruce and bramble, pausing every so often to listen. It took her near a granite bluff, scarred with old bullet pits and names carved in drunken hands. There she saw the fire pit, cold now but fresh, circled in stones, and beside it a tin plate with jerky scraps left behind. She crouched, ran a finger through the ash. Whoever had been there didn't want to be found, but hadn't gone far. She made her way back, slower than she'd come. Watched the trees harder now. Days later, a rider came. He didn't arrive loud. There was no gallop, no shouting from the ridge. Just the quiet tread of a black mare down the overgrown trail. The man on its back was lean and sun-browned, his coat patched at the elbows and a rifle slung behind him in plain view. He didn't wear the look of a bandit. There was too much stillness in him, like someone used to watching from shadows. Ada stood on her porch, shovel in hand, unmoving. The man stopped just short of the clearing, one hand raised in a slow peace gesture. "I'm not lookin' for trouble," he said, voice rasped like it hadn't been used much lately. "Just water, maybe a place to rest a while." She didn't answer, watched his eyes. Watched how they flicked past her to the cabin, to the trees behind, to the grave. "I don't open my door to passing men," she said at last. "You don't have to," he replied. "I'll camp near the creek, far as you need. Just don't want to sleep with my back to coyotes." That made her hesitate, not because she pitied him, but because she understood. This land didn't forgive strangers, even less those who walked it alone. She gave a slow nod toward the bank. "There's flat ground east of the stone ridge. You pitch there, you pitch quiet." The man touched the brim of his hat, much obliged. He turned his horse and rode off without asking more. She didn't sleep that night, listened to every owl cry, every crackle of branch in the underbrush. By morning, she was already at work again, splitting wood, mending the garden fence where deer had passed through. The man stayed out of sight, true to his word, but his presence folded into the woods like smoke. She felt it, whether she wanted to or not. That evening, she found a bundle left at the edge of her clearing. A wrapped rabbit, skinned clean, still fresh. She stared at it a long time, then picked it up and carried it to the fire. The rabbit sizzled in her skillet, its scent drifting through the open window like a memory. She seasoned it with juniper and salt, little else, and ate by the hearth with her knees drawn close, the way she had in her girlhood when nights were long and her father's silences longer still. The meat was good, clean kill, no blood clotting in the joints. A hunter's offering, quiet and careful. She didn't look toward the trees, didn't speak thanks aloud. But she left a bit uneaten, and in the morning it was gone. The man lingered like fog on the low ground, not always visible but present. Once, she caught sight of him stringing a line near the creek, trout flapping in the shallows. Another time, she heard the whine of his knife against a whetstone, steady and unhurried. He kept his distance, never crossed into her clearing. But his axe did, a jar of wild honey left beside her garden gate, a shirt patched and folded neatly on a stump where she had left one to dry, torn at the shoulder. They did not speak again for weeks. Then one dusk, as the air turned sharp and golden, he came up the path with his hat in his hands, not close, just to where the porch's shadow touched the grass. "You build good fences," he said. She didn't stop chopping wood, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "You watching me?" Not meaning to, just noticed. Fences hold, plants grow, that's rare. She drove the axe down clean through the pine block. "I build what I need." He nodded. "I reckon you do." He didn't ask to stay, didn't offer stories, just turned back the way he'd come, boots soundless on the needled path. That night she dreamed of her daughter for the first time since the burial. Dreamed of tiny hands and warmth on her chest, of milk gone to waste, and a lullaby she hadn't known she still remembered. When she woke, her cheeks were damp, and the fire had burned down to coals. By autumn the trees burned gold and red, and the frost came down sudden. She worked harder to stack her stores, dried beans, salted roots, rabbit, and venison when she could get it. One evening her snare caught nothing but fur tufts and blood. A hawk had stolen her quarry. She muttered curses under her breath and reset the line. As she walked back, a low cough stopped her. She turned, startled, hand already reaching for her blade. The man sat slouched against a birch, breathing ragged. His shirt was soaked red at the side, darker than dusk shadow. He tried to speak, but blood flecked his lip. The mare stood loose nearby, reins dragging. She didn't ask questions, didn't curse him or demand why he'd brought his trouble here. She just knelt, tore his shirt, saw the gash, deep, ugly, not clean. He watched her face as she worked, eyes clouded with pain but steady. "You know how to stitch," he rasped. "I know how to keep something from dying." It took hours. She boiled water, used what brandy she had, stitched with gut thread and silence. He didn't cry out, not once, just clenched his teeth and watched the rafters like he was somewhere far away. When it was done, she helped him to the cot by the fire. He collapsed into it like a felled tree. Later she found the bullet in the bloody rag pile, not a clean shoot. The kind men fired when they meant to maim, not kill. She burned it in the stove. He slept for 2 days, feverish and mumbling names that didn't belong to her. She heard pieces, a brother called Caleb, a woman named Jude, something about Montana, but she didn't press. On the third morning he woke while she poured broth beside him. His voice came soft, worn down. "Name's Elias." She didn't give hers, he nodded anyway. "Didn't come here to bring trouble, it found me, won't stay long." "You shouldn't move at all." "I'll heal fast." She gave a wry grunt. "You bled like you meant to leave this world." He gave the smallest smile she'd seen on a man since her husband died, one that didn't want anything. "I changed my mind." She left him to sleep again, but something in the cabin had shifted. The walls seemed to hold more warmth than before, and for the first time in months, she caught herself humming. The snow came early that year, soft and soundless, blanketing the cabin roof and weighing the pine limbs till they bowed like mourners. Ada watched it fall from the window, her breath fogging the glass. Inside, the fire kept the chill at bay. Elias slept deeper now, the color back in his face, the fever finally broken. He didn't ask her why she lived alone. Didn't pry about the grave beneath the trees or the shadows in her gaze. Instead, he took to listening. When she spoke, which was rare, he listened like the words were something sacred. And when she didn't, he matched her quiet with his own, letting silence settle like dust. In small ways, they fell into rhythm. He'd limp to the woodpile, despite her warnings, and split logs till sweat ran down his spine. She'd grind corn by hand, shaping ash cakes while he carved small animals from pine knots with his whittling knife. They shared the tasks, each knowing the other wouldn't ask for help, but needed it just the same. One evening she caught him kneeling at the grave. He didn't touch it, didn't speak, just stood after a time, hat held to his chest. When he saw her watching from the porch, he only nodded. No questions, no sorrowful looks. Just a man recognizing grief in another and leaving it untroubled. Later, over stew and firelight, he said, "I buried someone too." Ada didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Some things announced themselves in the way a man holds still around joy. Instead, she passed him another slice of bread, their fingers brushing briefly. He didn't pull away. That night, as wind whispered through the eaves, she found herself reaching for her journal, something she hadn't opened since the loss. She wrote a single line. He does not speak like a man looking for anything more than peace. By midwinter, the cabin was no longer a place just for surviving. It had become something else. He hung herbs from the rafters. She taught him to trap rabbits her way. They spoke more now, not stories of the past, but of what needed doing, what to plant come thaw, how many boards they'd need for a shed. Still, the past was not done with either of them. The first sign came in the form of a horse. No rider, just a bay mare, panting and blood-flecked, stumbling into the edge of the clearing one morning as Ada knelt at the stream. Its eyes were wild, flanks scored deep with whip marks. She took the reins gently, led it to the trough, and when Elias came limping out, his face went hard as hammered iron. "That's Harlan's horse," he said. She met his gaze. "Someone followed you. Or followed the blood trail I left." He checked the saddlebag. Inside was a torn map, a locket, and a silver-handled pistol. He didn't explain what they meant, only looked eastward toward the line of hills. "They'll come in the thaw." Ada's fingers curled around her coat. "How many?" "Used to be 5. Last I heard, 2 still rode under his name." "Then we make ready." He studied her. "I brought this to your door. You didn't bring anything I wasn't already prepared for." He looked at her like he might say more, but instead he went inside and started cleaning his rifle. That evening she began laying traps not for animals, but men. They spent the next weeks reinforcing the cabin, shoring up the door, fitting iron brackets to the windows, digging lines of sight through the brush. He taught her how to shoot from a crouch. She showed him where the land softened under rain and how to listen for movement after dark. They did not speak of fear, only of readiness. On the coldest night of the season, when the fire guttered low and the wind clawed through every crack, he reached across the cot and took her hand. No words, just warmth, and she let him keep it. Because when you've buried a child, a husband, a name, what you learn above all is this: you do not wait for love to come easily. You recognize it in the quiet, and you choose it day by day. The melt came swift and merciless, tearing the river loose from its ice shell, flooding the low marsh where Ada had once gathered cattails. Trees groaned as their roots drank deep, and the earth turned black and soft underfoot. Life surged forward in green bursts, as if winter had been holding its breath too long. Ada and Elias stood at the edge of the field one morning, watching a pair of deer move ghost-quiet through the mist. He leaned on the crutch he no longer needed and said, "It'll be soon." She nodded, not looking at him. "I know." By then the cabin had become more than refuge. It bore their imprint, 2 cups always set out, 2 chairs pulled close to the fire, herbs strung in twine above the stove in neat, even rows. He'd carved a toy horse and left it by the grave one day without comment. She found it and cried when he wasn't looking. They had cleared the brush west of the house, laid brush traps and covered trenches, oiled their rifles, and walked every route into the valley. She taught Elias which stones rolled underfoot and where the echo of a voice carried sharpest. He showed her how to take the gun apart blind, how to hold it in a wind. They were not preparing for a fight. They were preparing to survive one. It was Elias who saw the dust first. 3 riders, not 2, one lagging behind, wounded or slow, but coming still. They rode hard, cut through the ridge line like men who knew how to break a thing and laugh about it later. Ada's gut twisted, but her hands were steady. She filled the oil lamps, soaked the rags, set flint by the window ledge. That night she lay beside Elias without speaking, her breath matched to his. Dawn would bring blood. When it came sudden. A shot rang out in the dim, hitting the side of the shed in a blast of splinters. Then another, closer. She rolled from bed, rifle in hand, heart calm in her chest like it had done this before. They didn't storm in, not yet. They circled, tested, yelled taunts that had no weight. Elias watched from the crawl space he dug near the chimney, where a crack in the wall gave a clear view downhill. "Harlan with them," he said. "Older now. Meaner, but still him." "Which one?" "Middle, with the hawk tattoo on his throat." She nodded, "Then he dies first." They waited, it took hours. Then the fire came. A torch hurled through the back window, catching on the curtain. Ada smothered it before it spread. Smoke curled up anyway. Then came the second. Elias stepped out the side door and fired twice. 1 man fell. Ada took the roof, aimed through the slat Elias had cut weeks before. Her shot took the second man off his horse, screaming into the thorns. The third, Harlan, charged straight for the porch. He hit the trap. His legs sank into the spiked pit they disguised with pine needles. He roared, flailing, gun firing wild into the air. Ada didn't hesitate. She walked out slow, rifle leveled, smoke curling behind her like a funeral shroud. He looked up, blood pouring down his thigh. "I should have finished you," he spat. "You never knew me," she said, and she pulled the trigger. It was over in seconds. The wind picked up, carrying the smoke west. The horses scattered, One body twitched in the brush, then stilled. The world fell quiet again. Elias came to her side, lips tight. She didn't cry. She just stood there, blood on her boots, and let her breath come back. "Is it done?" he asked. "For now." They buried the bodies deep in the ravine, far from the pines, far from the child's grave. That evening they sat by the fire, bone-tired but alive. The cabin smelled of smoke and gunpowder. Elias poured them each a drink from the last of the whiskey. "To survival," he said. She shook her head. "To peace." They clinked tin cups and drank. He brushed her hand again. This time she took his and held it, not because the danger was gone, but because they had stayed. The valley healed slowly, the way the body does after a long fever, inch by inch, with moments of softness between aches. Spring deepened into early summer, and the wound the fire left in the side of the cabin was patched with new-cut cedar. The grass grew tall around the graves in the ravine, and neither Ada nor Elias spoke of them again. What was buried stayed buried, but the land remembered. It always does. They planted late but strong, rows of corn and squash, pole beans curling up the stakes. Ada pressed each seed into soil with the reverence of someone who'd once prayed to no answer. Elias built a second shelter near the edge of the clearing, a place for tools and smoke-drying meat. He carved her a new chair, wide and low, so she could sit with her knees tucked up and watch the light shift through the pines. One morning, she rose before him and walked out barefoot to the child's grave. She sat there a long while, fingers moving over the carved horse Elias had left months ago. The moss had started to take it, softening its edges, giving it a look of long belonging. A sparrow darted down, pecked at the needles, then vanished again. "I still see her," she whispered. "I still see her in the quiet." She wasn't speaking to the child. Not exactly. She was speaking to the woman she'd been, the one who had climbed down from the mountains with her arms full of loss and nowhere left to put it. That woman had built a home in the bones of a gunslinger's ruin, had taken grief and given it form, had chosen to stay. Elias found her there when the sun was full on the clearing. He didn't speak, only knelt beside her. "I thought I'd have to carry her forever," Ada said. "You still do," he answered. She nodded. "But the weight's different now." He reached out, not to pull her up, but to rest his hand over hers. Their fingers curled together. Later that day, they set out new stakes for a fence line. The boundary no longer felt like a defense, it felt like a promise. Here we begin again. Here we choose to stay. When the rains came, they moved inside together, Elias lighting the lamp while Ada stirred the pot, and the sound of soup bubbling and boots drying by the fire replaced the silence that once filled every corner. In the evenings, he played the harmonica she'd salvaged from the hearth shelf, the cracked notes settling like lullabies. She kept a new journal now, one not stained with grief, but with ash and flour and garden dirt. She filled its pages slowly, deliberately, as if writing not to remember but to shape what came next. There were no declarations between them, no need. He mended her boots when the stitching wore thin. She rubbed liniment into his shoulder when the scar stiffened in the cold. They slept side by side, not for warmth or safety, but for peace. The kind of peace you don't find, you make. One morning, as the mist curled low across the ground and the trees swayed with the ease of early light, Ada stepped out onto the porch and looked across the clearing. Smoke rose from the chimney, slow and sure. The fence line held. The pines whispered as always, but the ache beneath their roots had softened. She reached for Elias' hand behind her, felt him there, steady as the earth. And for the first time in her life, she let herself believe this might be home.